Okay, the psalm today is Psalm 120. And it is a song of ascents. And this is the songs of ascents. I don't know if you remember back when we were studying Psalms, but the songs of ascent are a collection of like 15 psalms from 120 through 134. And they're traditionally sung by the Israelites as they travel or ascended, okay, to Jerusalem or at festivals. And they're often called pilgrim songs. So they're like songs to sing on the road, like 2,400 bottles of beer on the wall. Or
This was their 100 bottles of beer.
100. Is it 100?
Yeah,
that starts with 100.
Or if it's a really
No,
long
we always started at 99.
99 bottles of beer.
Yeah.
That's how we always started.
Pilgrim songs. They emphasize God's grace, protection, and sovereignty with themes of worship, repentance, and longing for Zion. So David's sermon today is about ascending, to the mountain as we study Matthew. And so I'll read. They are traveling songs. They're songs of worship that the Israelites would sing as they were going to Jerusalem, ascending to the mountain.
Mine got sidetracked by that whole notion of songs for different things, like Gamby dancers, working on the railroad, rhythms, the rhythm of walking, so forth.
Or marching.
Nasty songs we sang as we marched.
Jodies. That's what they're called.
What are
Jodies.
Jody?
But 120 starts out the hard part of the journey, I think. And in one commentator had actually said the reason I was drawn to 120 was one commentator said that it was kind of associated with what was going on during like 2 Samuel verse, it was chapter 5. That the tumultuous kinds of times that were going on then. But then later I read that this is not considered a psalm of David. There are some of the ones that the songs of ascent are considered, 3 or 4 of them were considered or attributed to David, but this particular one was not. So, I call on the Lord in my distress, and he answers me. Save me, Lord, from lying lips and from deceitful tongues. What will he do to you? And what more besides, you deceitful tongue? He will punish you with a warrior's sharp arrows, with burning coals of the broom brush. Woe to me that I dwell in Meshech, and that I live among the tents of cedar. Too long have I lived among those who hate peace. I am for peace, but when I speak, they are for war. And this is the struggle of the sojourner, which the psalmist feels like a stranger or an exile, specifically mentioning Meshech and cedar, which represent living among dangerous barbarian-like people far from home. So thought we would just start with that, today. And then just to kind of recap, last week, Kathy was studying, I think, the first couple of chapters in 2 Samuel. And just to kind of recap what happened in 2 Samuel 3. So what happened then? What did we end with last time? Those of you who were here, you remember.
Abner was killed.
Right.
Saul's right-hand man.
Right. That Job, that Abner, remember that Ishbosheth or Ishbaal was the son of Saul that Abner had put into place. Okay. And Abner was a brother right, of, I got the family, I printed out family trees and I sent them to everybody because I got mixed up in who belonged to who
Right.
around here. But Abner was Saul's uncle, I think, Saul's father's brother, right? But Abner was really the guy in charge, but he was putting Saul's son kind of as king over Israel. And then they had a disagreement about the concubine. That's what we were talking about at the end of the last week, where Saul's concubine, Ishmael, thought that Abner had taken Saul's concubine to bed, which is treason. Okay. Abner, the commentator I was reading says Abner really never admitted that actually happened. He was furious that they would treat him, or that Ishmael would say that he did this. So he decides to immediately, I'm going to go away. David, I'm going to support David. I'm not going to support you anymore. You know, and so he went to David, and then David was basically saying, okay, I will let you come. And David agrees to peace, with Abner, and he says the one condition that I'll let you come is that if you give my wife back to me, Michal, back. And so Abner persuades Ishbosheth to get Abner back to David, or give Michal back to David. And so then Joab shows up from fighting the battle for David. And he says, what are you trusting this Abner guy for? And he said, and so Joab, without any approval from David, goes out and has his men go out and say, hey, Abner, come on back. Because Abner was out convincing all of the elders of Israel to come to David. And he says, come on back here, and he met with him privately and stabbed him in the stomach and killed him.
It seemed to be in retribution for
Abner
having killed Joab's brother.
Yeah, Joab's brother in the battle.
Yeah.
After he had followed him, and Abner says, please don't follow me. And he kept doing it. And so he said, well, here. And he threw a spear and killed him, and killed him. And Kirsch has said that he killed him in the same way as he had killed his brother. Okay.
Well,
But then it says stomach in one, and it says groin and out the back in the other one. So I don't know how it was the same way.
Yeah.
Stabbed.
Yeah.
It was in the
It was
lower
stabbed.
part of the
Yeah,
tail.
it was down here somewhere. Okay. But
Real life for an eye,
so what usually happens when someone kills someone that David doesn't want them to kill?
They die.
Yeah.
David makes sure he
Violently.
backs out, does like a little song and dance for that person. Boy, they were a great person. I didn't want them
I didn't
killed.
want
This
them-
was
I didn't
all
want
on
them
that
killed.
guy.
Right. I didn't
He
want
was quite corporate makers.
I was gonna say
Not what I wanted.
right. And so, but wonder, I would just wonder why didn't he kill him too? And Kirsch comments that David was a cunning military person, and kind of getting very political too. And he knew that I might need this Joab guy in the
well, Joab was David's
right,
nephew.
he was, right.
But
And
still.
still, it would have caused,
You don't want to be killing people in your
he
family.
was an excellent person.
I got a few.
He was too good to be killed. And the blood
Can take care of
feud kind of thing that would be going on, what kind of political problems would that cause him? And he would eventually could become David's hitman.
And Joab was from the tribe of Judah.
Mm-hmm.
And David was trying real hard to mend fences
Right.
with Judah. To kill Joab is not going to be a savvy political move. And
Right.
if nothing else, David was very well versed in the politics of the time and the region. He's not going to be creating that kind of issue.
And David keeping the throne and spreading, as becoming
Would have had
successful.
Been divided for years, and they just had a 7-year civil war leading up to the.
Even though David had been anointed years and years and years before by Saul, so he was God's chosen.
But
everybody
knew
did
that.
I was going to say, but not
No.
everybody was willing to accept David because they didn't know all of that.
And Abner, it said, was aware of God's promise to David, yet he still sided with Saul's son.
Well, Nathan was a major character during this time period also.
Yeah, and I think that it's another chapter, 2 or 3 chapters, we get to Nathan.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're starting with chapter 4. And
Our names again, Sarah.
Sarah, could you read chapter 4? It's 12 verses.
And the son of Saul heard that Abner had died in Hebron, and he was utterly shaken. And all Israel was dismayed. And the son of Saul had 2 men, commanders of raiding parties. The name of the one was Banah, and the other Rishon, sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, who was of the Benjaminites. For Beeroth too was reckoned with Benjamin. And the Beerothites fled to Gittim, and have been sojourners there till this day. And Jonathan, son of Saul, had a lame son, 5 years old he was, when the news of Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel. And his nurse bore him off and fled. And it happened in her haste to flee that he fell and was crippled. And his name was Mephibosheth. And the sons of Rimmon, the Beerothite, Rechab and Banal, went and came in the heat of the day to the house of Ishbosheth, as he was taking his midday rest. And look, the woman who kept the gate had been gleaning wheat and nodded and fell asleep. And they came into the house as he was lying in his bedchamber, and they struck him and killed him and cut off his head, and took his head and went off through the Arabah all night long. And they brought Ishbosheth's head to David in Hebron and said to the king, Here is the head of Ishbosheth, son of Saul, your enemy, who sought your life. The Lord has granted my lord the king vengeance this day against Saul and his seed. And David answered Rishon and Banan his brother, the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, and he said to them, As the Lord lives, who saved my life from every strait, he who told me, saying, Look, Saul is dead, and thought he was bearer of good tidings, and seized him and killed him in Ziklag, instead of giving him something for his tidings. How much more so when wicked men have killed an innocent man in his bed in his house? And so will I not requite his blood from you and rid the land of you? And David commanded the lads, and they killed them, and chopped off their hands and feet, and hung them by the pool in Hebron. And Ishbosheth's head they took and buried in the grave of Abner in Hebron. That was fun.
They are Iranians.
Yeah.
Right?
Brutal.
So what if David's trying to, he's got a long history before this of this kind of retribution.
Yeah.
What if he's trying to change the tone? Change the tone, change that kind of behavior. He's got a kingdom he's trying to unite.
And he's trying to say it's not okay to
Yeah.
kill the enemies of,
Yeah.
so I'll kill those that kill them.
Yeah, because it sounds like Ishbosheth or He was just gonna hang out and be a quiet behind the scene. He never
Yeah.
really wanted to. Abner was the one that pushed him into being king.
Yeah, because he was, what, the fourth son?
Well, he was like a puppet.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, he was. But there was these other guys that were like, oh well,
It's like the Godfather.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
Almost
was
like
like
politics
Really, yeah.
in the Middle Ages and all.
So Ishmael had heard of the assassination and he was scared,
right.
okay? Because he knew he didn't have any courage at all. And his whole strength was based on and depended upon another person. That was Abner.
Not God. I think that's important to
Right.
stress is that
Right.
Ishmael was
He
depending upon
needed Abner alive if he was going to keep his power in Israel. And so he was located up north a little on the other side of the Jordan in a town, they think from 2 Samuel, Mahanaim.
Is that it?
Yeah,
And that
I could
is,
just find it on the map.
it's right
On that
here.
map, yeah,
It's right here.
just to the west of. So like in the middle of
Here's here,
Jordan to the west.
right down here.
It may not be on that map.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Um,
couldn't find it on that one, but Susan had a much more detailed map.
And so there were these brothers were leaders of some raiding bands. So sometimes they were called captains in some things that I read. And they were plotting to kill Ishmael to win David's favor because they knew this guy didn't have any power, and they had seen what David could do, in battle. So then out of the blue, it introduces these two brothers, and then out of the blue, it just has this little couple of verses about Jonathan's son becoming lame. Okay.
Yeah,
is
I
that
didn't
all
know that about. I didn't.
What that have to do?
It's just introducing him. He's going to be discussed later.
Oh,
But
that's right.
I just
Forgot
kind of
that.
threw it in there. So someone, had a spare piece, has some spare notes and said, I'm going to stick it in here, and it says so I said, out of the blue, Jonathan's son is introduced in verse 4, chapter 4, and he we discussed in detail in future chapters, but it just tells about how he got lame.
From being dropped
From the nurse, trying to run after she heard about Jonathan's death at the battle. Then she was trying to take the boy away and dropped him.
How old apparently?
He was 5 years old.
Young child, it said. And then it brings up. Then we pick back up immediately after that, verse 4, back to the story of the two brothers and how they went into a guard. They went into the house. So they went into the house. It was the heat of the day. Apparently, in the version that you read, it mentioned the woman. In the version that I had, it didn't mention her. But apparently, a woman had been the only guard of the person at his house was this woman preparing wheat, and she fell asleep,
Yes, the time.
and and Ishmael was in there napping, in the heat of the day, taking his daily nap or whatever. And these guys walk in like they're going to go get some wheat or whatever, and go in, stab him in the stomach, cut off his head, and walk out.
So brutal.
And when they mention the Arabah, going by way of, it's like it refers to the deep, arid Jordan Rift Valley. So they went down through the desert, by way of the desert, and it kind of goes all the way from the Sea of Galilee all the way down to the Dead Sea. So it was just their way of kind of escaping through the desert, went down to Hebron and delivered this head,
Like the mafia.
Yeah,
Cut off hands,
The
feet,
dishes,
horse
yeah.
head, what else?
Sleep
Put in the
with
bed.
dishes.
I remember.
Yeah, we all remember that. I know.
Oh, the horse head, right?
Yeah.
It's a big moment in American history.
Yeah, really, that time, that year, very, good.
So they walk in and take his head and they slip out. Everyone was, the woman was still asleep, I guess. And they proceeded to take the head to David in Hebron and present it to him. And probably thinking along the way, wonder what he's going to give us. What kind of honor or reward he's going to give us for getting rid of this. And he can be king now, So,
Well, that would be sort of, it strikes me as that sort of be the normal,
way for a soldier to think.
right? That's what the tradition sort of was, I would think.
Apparently word hadn't gotten out that, just
What
the
had David
people
done to
that,
the Amorites and
yeah, when they came just announcing Saul was dead and being gleeful about it,
uh-huh.
he said no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't disrespect Saul like that.
They
And it's
didn't have
like
it with-
the killing his
They
son.
didn't read Second Samuel
Yeah.
before they did that.
Yeah, the word apparently had not gotten out. So
So David was not pleased, and he compared, "Hey, didn't you hear about what I did to the Amorite? That was Saul. What am I going to do to you?" And so he ordered his men to cut off the hands and feet, and they hung the body by the pool in Hebron. And in ancient Israel, I read, cutting off hands and feet served as a symbolic kind of thing of disabling an enemy. Okay, they can't go anywhere, they can't fight, and they can't flee. Okay, but then they just hung the bodies up, and that must have smelled really good.
Well, in the Roman times, they would behead people and stick their heads on pikes all along the road.
But here David knew he was the anointed one, and he knew that God was going to have him be king over Israel, and so it made sense that he was going to honor Ishmael by burying him with where he had honored Abner and get the support of the Israelites by what he did and showing true that he was really saddened and this is not what he wanted. So he ended up with this particular chapter by honoring Ishmael by burying his head at Abner's tomb. Okay, and then what happens next? I'm going to read Samuel 5, verses 1 through 4. All the tribes, David becomes king over Israel. All the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and said, "We are your own flesh and blood. In the past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel on their military campaigns. And the Lord said to you, you will shepherd my people Israel, and you will become their ruler." When all the elders of Israel had come to King David at Hebron, the king made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. David was, and so we kind of come to realize now, and it kind of gives in verse 4 and 5, gives an idea of David waited a long time. Okay, for this. It had been a long time since Samuel had anointed him. So David, in verse 4, it says, David was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 40 years. In Hebron, he had reigned over Judah for 7.5 years. And in Jerusalem, he reigned over all Israel and Judah 33 years. So they say here, we are your own flesh and blood. So claiming him as theirs. Okay. The Civil War was over. David was king, and he made that covenant with them.
And he got anointed for the third time. Maybe
Right,
this
and
one will
anointed.
stick.
Right. He's used to having oil poured over, I guess. So it has been years since Samuel anointed David. He waited on God's time, but not in idleness, Kirsch says. He made his own destiny by force and backroom intrigue. Okay. So he was 30 years old when he began ruling Judah in Hebron, and he served there for 7.5 years. And then after the murder of Ishmael, the delegations anointed him there. And so he was now 37 and a half, or 37, 38, when he started ruling over Israel. And he ruled over Israel 33
He's pretty old.
years. So he was 70, over 70.
That was unusual then.
When,
Right.
when he was no longer.
We don't understand that, do we?
No, I don't understand. I think 70 is quite young. Right
Yeah.
now. I think he's a young.
He gets
buck.
younger every day.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, to live that long, right?
Yeah. At that time, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, so the first time David was anointed was back in 1 Samuel 16.
Well, wasn't it more a case of if you
That was
survived
before David
adulthood, then you'd live?
Childhood.
Childhood was
With the
Was
deed,
probably, yeah.
Yeah.
slaughters.
yeah. If you survived into adulthood, I think you
Environment.
Yeah.
You know.
you could get to be right on.
But childhood was difficult because they didn't have a lot of the medicines, and you had to get used to the parasites in the water. You had to do this because
Yeah.
when I lived in Laos in that village, they talked about if you live past 2.
Really?
Yeah, if you
Wow.
could live past 2 years old,
Wow.
because by then your body
Your
had
immune
developed
system.
an immune system
Yeah.
for the things that were in the area.
Yeah.
A lot of children died of dysentery,
Yeah.
which
Well,
is, they would
understandable.
drink that
Water.
water that wasn't good,
Still doing
and
it.
it would tear up their intestinal tracts.
Did the women breastfeed?
Some, but they really couldn't do that much because they were working all the time, The village I lived in was kind of still, they had not gone to the metal age yet, so we were still using stone and wood and stuff.
What year was that?
1990s.
Wow. Yeah,
So-
Peru is really like that. I mean, they're very either poor or rich.
So in the last sentence of this particular chapter, it said, in Jerusalem, he reigned over all Israel and Judah 33 years. So David, the first thing David has to do after he's been anointed by Israel is, I got to get out of Hebron. I've got to have a more central location. Okay. So until now, he had been ruling from Hebron, and now he had to, as king of Israel and Judah, his first task was to find a new capital city. Okay. So he was saying, from the military point of view, it needs to be centrally located in Israel, and it should be easy to defend. Okay. And from a political point of view, it should not currently belong to any one of the other 12 tribes. Okay. It's like an island. Kirsch described it, an island of national identity in a sea of tribal rivalries. Because these tribes were still very nomadic, kind of not unified groups. You talk about the blood feuds and things like that. And Kirsch kind of describes it kind of like the District of Columbia in early US history.
Right.
Okay. Central kind of place. And so Jerusalem was his choice. It was a fortified hill in the heart of Israel, and it had been kind of regarded as a holy place. It said that, and Kirsch even goes into fairy tales about, Jerusalem and that type of thing, and what had happened in Jerusalem. And it says it was kind of known as, this is where Adam offered the first sacrifice to God. This is where Noah erected his altar to the flood. This is where Abraham was called to sacrifice and slaughter Isaac. All of these things were purported to, Jerusalem kind of a thing.
That was sort of the mythology of
a
the.
mythology, and I think even in Kirsch's first chapter of there, where he was talking about the city of David. I don't know if I can find that statement, but it says stories about Jerusalem should not be dismissed because they are only myths. They are important precisely because they are myths.
Mhm.
Okay, Karen Armstrong in a book called Jerusalem.
What year was this?
Oh sheesh,
David ruled around the year 1000 BC.
Okay.
So about 3,000.
It's been a while.
so
Because Jerusalem really wasn't a city yet.
Mhm.
I think
So,
it was still referred to.
I
as-
think we might have time for because I know that I serve, so I'm going to have to stop
Yeah,
it.
you and I
You
need
know,
to go to
about
about,
quarter
yeah.
till.
10,
So
12 minutes.
if someone could read chapter 5, verses 6 through 15 about David and Jerusalem.
I can do it.
Okay.
The king.
Oh,
and-
wait, through 15.
Okay. You want me to do through 16? Because that just has 3 names.
Yeah, 16. Yeah,
Okay.
that's good.
The king and his men marched to Jerusalem against the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, who said to David, "You will not come in here. Even the blind and the lame will turn you back." Thinking, David can't come in here. Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, which is now the city of David. David had said on that day, "Whoever would strike down the Jebusites, let him get up the water shaft to attack the lame and the blind, those whom David hates." Therefore it is said, "The blind and the lame shall not come into the house." David occupied the stronghold and named it the city of David. David built the city all around from the Millo inward, and David became greater and greater, for the Lord, the God of hosts, was with him. King Hiram of Tyre sent messages to David, along with cedar trees and carpenters and masons, who built David a house. David then perceived that the Lord had established him over Israel, and that he had exalted his kingdom for the sake of his people Israel. In Jerusalem, he came from Hebron. David took more concubines and wives, and more sons and daughters were born to David. These are the names of those who were born to him in Jerusalem: Shammua, Shobab, Nathan, Solomon, Ibhar, Elishua, Nepheg, Japhia, Elishama, Eliada, and Eliphalet.
All
Very
from
good.
different women.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Each one of
one
those,
was a different
11 were from different women. And
Wow.
I think I sent everyone a copy of this, and you can see all of these kids listed, and all of these kids listed. When they know the mothers, it tells who the mother is, that type of thing. But it kind of helped me kind of look at these names, because there's so many names, and Samuel going back and being bandied back and forth. So David conquers Jerusalem. Currently, it currently belonged to the Jebusites, a native dwelling tribe of Canaan. And Joshua had once tried to take Jerusalem from the Canaanites, but he failed to break the defenses. So when David goes in, and when David's coming to take them over, they said, "David, he can't get in here," kind of a thing. And they taunt him, saying, "Even our blind and the lame can keep you from getting in here." And Kirsch kind of goes into where David is saying, you reach the blind and the lame, who are David's enemies, or David hated the lame and the blind. And Kirsch goes into this whole diatribe about, David wouldn't hate the lame and the blind. Why would he hate them? And I thought, that's ridiculous. That's not what he meant at all. It's that they taunted him and said the lame and the blind, and says, "Hey, we'll go up the water shaft, and we'll get those lame and the blind.
Yeah, mine's a little more direct as far as the hatred goes.
Uh-huh.
Verse 8, that day David said to his men, does anybody here hate the Jebusites as much as I do? Enough to kill them? Then go up through the water tunnel and attack those poor blind cripples. That's
Well, because
that's so more
because
weird.
they had the Jebusites had actually said, our blind and crippled ones can beat you.
Yeah.
So he's just repeating
Yeah.
that. It's like when he was on the field with
It's
Goliath,
trash
the
talk.
taunting,
Yeah, it's trash talk.
the taunting
Yeah.
kind of a thing.
Yeah,
You know,
I
I'll
like
get
this
your blind. If
transition.
you show me, I'll
Yeah.
get your blind and crippled.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
This is
Did-
fiercer.
Did anyone's translation mention? What was it? Windpipe instead of water pipe, because the coach kind of mentioned,
Yeah, mine's water tunnel.
you know,
Mine just says conduit.
yeah. So what he was doing is he was, even though Joshua had been unsuccessful, David was, and that they had mocked him, and then he came back and says, "We'll go up the water pipe. You know, we'll go through the water system, you know, and get into the city because it doesn't go into
Fortified.
you know, the fortified city has to get to the spring somehow. So we'll do the water pipe.
Won't charge the walls.
Yeah, right. We'll try to charge the walls.
Yeah.
But you know, there had even been fairy tales, as Kirsch had said, about Joab actually bending a tree back and getting Joab on the tree and springing him over the walls to conquer Jerusalem and getting him in there.
Yeah.
And when he did, they just gave up, you know, kind of a thing. But it was very strategic. It says anyone who conquers the Jebusites will have to use the water shaft to reach those lame and blind Jebusites in there, you know, who are, so it's just basically, but I really liked it when they were taunting him and saying, you know, you can't enter. And they said, you don't think he can enter, right? David can't get in here, right? Kind of a thing. But he did. And it doesn't go into a lot of detail. It just says he did it, you know, and he conquered them. So he promptly names the city, or at least the citadel, the center of the city, after himself. And the Lord God Almighty was with him. Okay. So with God on his side, David was ready for the next challenge, which was nation building phase. Okay. And what a challenge it was going to be, because the 12 tribes weren't unified, as we mentioned. They had a tendency toward blood feuds and civil war. David needed to build a complete infrastructure to develop relations with people, you know, other countries and other kingships around. It says he began building the city up from the outside inward. So when they mentioned Milo, it was terraces, from the terraces in. And then they do mention Hiram, the king of neighboring Tyre, which is north of Israel along the Mediterranean coast. And
It wasn't Saul from Tyre?
Yes,
Saul
I think
was-
Paul.
didn't-
Paul, whatever, the apostle Paul. Yeah, he was.
Paul
was from
Saul.
Tyre.
You tell
Paul
me.
Yeah.
Saul. Saul.
Yeah. You can-
That's all, this Saul, the newer Saul.
Seesaw.
Yeah.
Well, when he talks about building from the outside in, he's probably also referring to first goes up a wall for defense,
Yeah.
you know, stronger wall. And if you remember Nehemiah, when they came back from being captured and held in Babylon, one of the biggest things Nehemiah did was help build that wall bigger and stronger yet.
And
I think it's interesting that that David called it the city of David, because for someone who's so faithful to God. It seems like he's a little bit into self-aggrandizement there, and self-promotion instead of.
Well, later,
After all, he has all
Right.
these wives and concubines and everything. I mean, if that's not self-serving,
Yeah,
I don't know what is.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
And he's probably gonna
Right.
populate the
Yeah.
whole city single-handedly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're all
At
related.
the rate he's
Yeah,
going.
you know.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Christmas must be really
Yeah.
something.
So
they probably draw names.
Oh, okay.
the Nathan that's listed among the list of kids in verse 14, is that the Nathan?
No, no.
Oh.
Well, Nathan was the prophet that advised David throughout, and
It's not his son. That Nathan
no,
was not his
it's
son.
a different Nathan. Yeah.
Okay.
But Hiram, this neighboring king, provided rare lumber, the cedars, from Lebanon, the wood, and highly skilled carpenters and masons that had not yet been available in tribal Israel. And they built a palace. They used it to build a palace for David. And once the palace was underway, David says, well, now that I got a palace, I got to fill it up. Okay. And so he gets all of these concubines, some of which Kershaw mentioned were probably some of the Jebusites women to kind of gain, their side favor, whatever, the people that he now ruled.
Did they all
And-
live together? The women stay there, you think?
Well, it was a harem.
Yeah.
I don't know the structure of harems back then, and it says from First Chronicles, which that's the place that kind of waters down David and makes him look really, great. It says, and the fame of David went out into all the lands, and the Lord brought the fear of him among all nations. Okay. So you can kind of see David's family tree that I sent and review that, but it said, ironically, in the next chapter that will start, or in the next section of this chapter, David, all of these, so all of the lands were fear him from all the nations, except who didn't fear him? The Philistines. It says, ironically, David's former ally would put him to the first and crucial test of his kingship. The Philistines had been a thorn in Israel's side ever since the Israelites failed to drive them out of the land during the days of Joshua. Okay, so we'll start next week with chapter 5, verses 17, where David's going to have to go up against the Philistines.
We talked